Hey there, and welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show, where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. I am Casey Watts, school impact strategist and the host of this show. Now, if you are here, then you inevitably are an instructional leader who wants to make change happen, even when change seems impossible. And you can do that if you have cohesive, vision-driven teams that have done clarity work. They know exactly where they're headed and how they're going to get there. These teams have done identity work, and they've built their self and social awareness skills. And they have done collaboration work, and they know how to move beyond faux collaboration to get to true collaboration where change happens and where people get on board. I'm so excited to bring to you conversations that help you to do exactly that. The work that needs to be done to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to, I think this is episode 65, and we are going to be talking about goals, which is so exciting to me. And I think part of the reason is because, number one, I get to chat with Linda Rhyne. So that's super exciting. And also because I'm so futuristic and love talking about what things are happening in the future and how to make them happen. So, Linda, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to do this. So,
yeah.
Woohoo.
Fun fact, we actually just got off of a Twitter chat like just a few minutes ago together talking about goals for writing.
That's right. That's right. And you probably saw a little bit in some of my responses about how I chunk down the big projects and the big things that I'm always trying to work on. So
yeah, I think that
leads right into tonight.
Yeah, it's so important because I think a lot of people have a hard time with that specifically. Like, we can set the goals, but actually making it happen is a totally different story.
Yeah, it's true.
So our episode tonight is titled Chew the KUD, Breaking Down Goals into 30, 60, 90-day approach. So tell us a little bit, number one, about yourself and what your aspirations are.
Sure. So I'm Linda. I am an independent consultant that works with schools and districts and everywhere, working with people everywhere. And my goal is really to help us think about the systems at play when it comes to literacy and instructional coaching improvements, because those are two pillars that I find really important. But I often find that the people and some of the other parts of the system get lost. And we often continue to work in silos, right? So that's my goal, is like, how do we bring systems thinking to the forefront? And one of the ways is by really breaking down our goals and really putting everything that needs to happen into action, instead of, we're human, right? So we always are going to focus on what's right in front of us in the moment. So when we can really break down what feels really large into something tangible that we can knock out in 30 days, we'll get it done, right? Much more easily than trying to take on something looming. When things feel hard, we avoid them.
Yeah, we absolutely do. When we see this in ourselves, when we see this in the people that we work with too.
Yeah. But I'm also a mom. I've got 2 kids that are elementary aged. And they keep me busy, which is why I probably look like a Minecraft YouTuber tonight in the quote unquote gaming chair that is also an office chair. So we might bring up some gaming stuff tonight too.
Yeah. Probably at this point in our lives, it just comes naturally to us, where our kids are probably like, whoa, you know what that is?
That's right.
Yeah, dude, I know what that is because I hear you talk about it all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay, I'm really interested because when I first titled this episode and I sent it to you, I wrote Chew the KUD, and I actually had to look up. I was like, did I spell KUD right?
You did.
And CUD. So
Yep.
then when I sent it to you, you said, can we change the C to a K because it fits into, the format of what we're going to be talking about? So tell us a little bit about the essence behind this phrase and why particularly it's spelled this way.
Yep. So typically it's spelled with a C because that's what cows eat, right? They chew on cud, and you can picture like a really big cow mouth kind of just like munching on something when we talk tonight. And I chose this phrase because KUD, right? This is what we do when we think about student goals and the goals that we have for our students, or even standards. When we're breaking things down, we think about what is it that we need to know, the K, understand the U, and what do we need to do, right? But we don't typically apply that strategy to our own goals, regardless of our position in education. When we think about any type of improvement goal, there is going to be a know, understand, and do associated with it. So this started coming up for me in terms of working with instructional coaches. What are our goals as an instructional coach? And have we considered, oftentimes when we're in that type of position or any kind of leadership position, even with our colleagues as a PLC, we are asking other people to help us achieve our goals, right? So if we're not clear on what those other people need to know and understand, help us do the thing that we're trying to do, it's going to be really hard for us to achieve our goals because we might be asking people to do something, but they don't have the shared vocabulary that we do. And therefore we can't have healthy conversations about where we want to go or how we're going to bring about the improvement that we seek. The chew the cud part is really just because I really think we need to take time when we develop a goal. We really need to take time and chew on what is it that goal is really asking of ourselves. Is there knowledge that I myself need to develop? Is there a concept or a theory or a framework that I need to understand? And have I clearly outlined the actions that are going to help me achieve this goal? And can I really get really detailed and nitty gritty with them so that I'm really clear on what needs to happen first?
Right. Okay. So you've said KUD is going to stand for know, understand, and do. And one of the things that I find really interesting about this that you've talked about so far is how important it is for us to have this common shared vocabulary. And I think so often, especially when leaders are setting goals for their schools or even setting goals with the teachers, like this can happen with a group of people. You're setting goals, but you make assumptions about the shared understanding or knowledge that everyone has. And I think even on a personal level, we can make assumptions about ourselves, can we not?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about why you think it's important you talked about breaking down those goals into shorter increments. Why is that so important, especially if we're thinking about team dynamics?
Well, when we put forth something in front of ourselves or a team that feels really daunting, we avoid it, right? And so, to say we want to, let's put it in school improvement goal terms, right? We as a school, we're currently sitting at 60% proficiency in whatever subject area we're at. And our end of year goal is 80%. That's a lofty, giant goal.
Yeah.
And so if we are not getting clear on what are the smaller increments that we can cross off the list, right? Like we've all done, I've done this, right? Like where you add the small thing on your task list simply so you can cross it off, right? Because it feels good to achieve even those small things. So we have to chunk it down so that we have opportunities to celebrate our progress on the way and feel accomplished towards what might have felt daunting if we just said like, that's what we're going to do. Right.
Yeah.
And two, that also helps us identify what are the other tasks that we are not thinking of at first, right? Like we've got to chunk it down because sometimes in order for you to write a lesson with a student, you might have to do some research on the topic that you're studying, right?
Mhm.
With the kids. Maybe it's an unfamiliar territory for you as a teacher, and you've got to get clear on what is it that you need to know and understand in order to convey that information to students, right? Or
Mhm.
you might, maybe you need to search for a text. Like all of those things take time. And if we can get ahead of them, then we can feel really effective with what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. And if we don't do that, then we run the risk of having this lofty goal that just becomes a piece of wall art plastered to the wall that we see it, but we're not moving towards it because we don't know how to move towards it because we've
Exactly.
broken it down into smaller increments.
Yeah.
So you talk a little bit about this 30, 60, 90-day approach that you would take. What does that realistically look like, and how can you ensure teams are aligned around these actions that they'll take toward this overarching vision?
So the reason breaking it down into 90 days, number one, it matches a school year, right? Because we often work in quarters.
Yep.
So if we kind of design it at it, to align with a school year goal, it just feels natural in that way, right?
Yeah.
Because you're typically going to be able to either match the quarters of the school, or you might be able to get at least like 3 90-day cycles completed in a school year. And so really what it does is it helps you set your sights on, well, where are we hoping to be? What is our goal in breaking down that year-long goal? Where are we hoping to be that will tell us, yes, we are making progress
Mm-hmm.
towards that goal, or some of the actions that we've designed are not getting us where we need to be, or they're not doing it at the rate of progress that we want. So to me, it's kind of like the same way we document performing interventions with students, right? Like we want to design a plan for the 6 week cycle, and at that 6 weeks, we're not going to wait until the end of the year to decide if the interventions are working or not.
Right.
We want a good note of progress along the way so that we can shift. And so taking that year-long vision of where we want to be and breaking it down into, well, what's going to get us there? What is it that we need to work on first in the first quarter that's going to allow us to then begin making progress as the year continues?
Yeah.
Allows us to really get tangible with what is it that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And knowing what that first 90 days, second 90 days, third, all of that helps us then say, okay, well, what are we trying to do in the first month?
Mm-hmm.
Not the whole first quarter, right? What am I trying to do in the first month? And what is it that I need to tackle this week
Yeah.
to say that I've done it in the first 30 days? And that can be really powerful because it really gets us clear on what are we trying to do and how quickly can I turn this around, right? We don't want to, you can't design tasks to do next week that you can't do next week, right? So you have to choose priority tasks that you can actually get started
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. Okay. There are a couple of things I want to throw in real
Yeah, I
quick.
said a lot.
No, it's okay. And I love every minute of it. It's just my brain's like firing on all cylinders now. Okay. This reminds me of, first, there are so often, I think what happens is, I don't know if in your state, where are you actually? Are you in
North Carolina.
Okay, North Carolina. So here in Texas, a lot of schools have evaluation systems called T-tests, where the principals go in for walkthroughs and then they do like one evaluation throughout the year. But teachers are expected to set goals at the beginning of the year for their own instruction. Well, what sometimes happens is a grade level, a group of teachers are allowed to get together and they just determine a goal that they all are going to put on this form. And it's based on what students typically struggle with or struggle with the year before. But here's what happens: because we don't actually take the time to map out and chew the cud. Like, I just love that phrase. We don't take time to chew the cud.
Nope.
We have the same flipping goal every single year. And it's just kind of like, now we've gotten to a point where we nonchalantly say, oh yeah, well, they struggle with this. And that's what kids are always going to struggle with.
Yeah. And then what about our curriculum and approach is changing? Nothing. Right? Because we are human, and humans seek comfort. Humans seek pattern, right? Like, that is what our brain has evolved to search for.
Yeah.
And so why would we we have to be really intentional about making change and putting new things into action. And if we want change to actually happen, we have to make time to develop a plan for it.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just setting a goal to set a goal. And then, like you said, nothing will change. And we just live with the status quo. And we're like, gosh, I wonder what happened. It's like, well, the same stuff you did last year.
Yeah, exactly.
You just kept rolling, friends.
Just on repeat. It's like Groundhog Day.
Right.
Yeah. So the other thing that's made me think of is, if you take it down to the classroom level, I've worked with teachers before where we're thinking about, like, this is the skill that we need to teach. And it can be a reaction sometimes from teachers to say, we only need 3 days to teach that. Like, what are we going to teach around that skill for more than 3 days? When maybe the unit says we're going to take about 2 to 3 weeks to teach this concept or skill. But when you think about the standard that you're trying to approach, and then you break it down and scaffold it from, what do students actually know about this already? What's a common understanding? What do they need to do in order to have that understanding? There's so much you can do with one tiny skill or concept.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It's the same with our teams.
It is.
Our goals. Yeah.
It is. I mean, with the no part, it's an opportunity to build our knowledge, develop our vocabulary so that there's a clear understanding. Sorry, something alive just landed on me. Oh my God. I don't know what that was. Like I said, I'm normally not up in this room. Okay. So, but we need a solid understanding, because here's the thing, right? Like, if we don't have that, none of our conversations, none of what we do will actually make a difference. It's like the blind leading the blind, right? So we have to take the time to develop that knowledge and understanding about something, and think about, how does that inform my actions, right? So, like, from a coaching lens, right? This is a really simple one, but like, if I want teachers to participate in a coaching cycle, right? Something that they need to know is, like, how do I get in touch with my coach? And that sounds stupid, right, to say, but, and like silly. It's like, well, duh. Yeah, of course they need, but like, let's say that, because what if we don't realize that we're not communicating that as a coach, right? Like, we go back, we lean on assumptions. We know what happens when you assume, right?
Yes.
So really taking the time, like getting that nitty gritty with things in order to make an action happen, right? If my goal is to implement coaching cycles with teachers, I need them to know how to communicate. I need them to understand that it is a two-way thing, right? Like, we are both doing this, friend. Are we clear on that? Right? And here's what that looks like. And then, like, what are the actions that the teacher needs to take in order for my goal to be achieved?
Yeah.
Right. And the same can be said for any kind of teacher goal with students. Y'all, this is true for like personal life goals too. I mean, have I 30, 60, 90'd my family? No. Is it on my list to do this year? Yes. Because I'm like, what is on my vision board for our family? And like, how am I going to make it happen? Yeah. Otherwise, I'm just tossing it up there and nothing will happen.
Let's just throw some spaghetti on the wall.
Yes. Yes. Maybe it'll stick.
Maybe it will. And most likely It will not, or it will stick and it'll leave a really sloppy, nasty mess that you have to clean up, and you have to scrape it off of your cabinets.
Exactly.
I'm only speaking from experience. Okay, let's talk about, because this show is all about cohesive, vision-driven teams.
Yep.
How do you see this affecting teams? Like if teams are setting goals with this approach, realistically, what does that look like?
Yep. So let's just say really general terms. You want to improve the effectiveness of your PLCs, right? Okay, friends. Number one, have we defined what effective looks like? Can we name that? Right? Do we understand how we show up? Have we developed norms together? Right? Like, have we done the things that we have determined? Because like some of those words and language mean different things to different people.
Absolutely.
And if we're not clear on all of us seeking the same outcome, then none of our actions will align either. Like we all might think we're rowing in the same boat and, one person's pulling us back and the other person's making us turn, and we'll just end up like a rowboat on a pond in circles. Yeah. So I think that's my question for the folks listening to this, right? Is like, have you taken the time to chew on for a team, a shared knowledge, a shared understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is everybody clear on how their actions impact what the larger group has decided on is the vision or goal for that team?
Yeah.
Because again, like you might think that you're doing something that benefits the group, and that might not be the case. So if we haven't talked about it, then everybody's on their own. Everybody's showing up with their best selves, right? Like nobody's thinking like, oh, I'm going to destroy this team today. Like nobody's doing that. They all are thinking that they're doing something helpful.
Right.
So get ahead of it and define it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a true story. One of the things that I worked on with a campus a few years ago was getting all on the same page about guided reading. Like our focus was small group instruction, guided reading, strategy groups, things like that. Well, this was probably 4 years ago now, but when we started having these conversations, and this is a pretty large campus that I was working with, when we started having these conversations, one of the teachers said, I mean, we've done this for years. Doesn't everybody knows what guided reading is? And it was just this moment for me where I was thinking as an instructional leader, oh, I'm seeing like big picture and I get to go into all of these different classrooms and see what's actually happening and having all of these intentional conversations, but they have a super narrowed lens and they are focused on their students from beginning of year to end of year. Mm-hmm. And even in their passerby conversations with each other, it's not like they're stopping to say, hey, tell me about your definition of XYZ. Those are not conversations they're having. So we as instructional leaders and facilitators have to be really intentional about having those purposeful conversations to build the common language. Yeah, otherwise, we all still just assume like, yeah, well, we've had training. We all know what it is. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's move on.
Exactly. Yeah. Even when we ask people in a staff development or something to read the same article, we all will walk away with a different lens and understanding. Yes, we might all share some commonalities or be able to summarize similarly and share the main idea, but there will be a different takeaway for each person unless we have a conversation about it. And that's typically intentional. Like authors write in a way that allows people to bring their background knowledge to show up for text and develop deeper meaning, right? So we're always thinking within our own context, which is why, especially when we're trying to move school improvement forward together, it has to be working from a shared knowledge and understanding, and a shared vision that everybody can explain and share and understand. It's not just like, yes, I've read it, and yes, we've talked about it. It's like we all can explain it in our own words.
Yeah. I often have our whoever it is. I don't want to say just teachers because it could be other people in the group, but we always will have a working, like, what is our working definition of this? Here's what we know research says and the experts say and this article says and so on and so forth. But based on that and your interpretation, your background experience, your knowledge, what's our working definition for what we're doing right now? Because sometimes that working definition might even shift a little bit depending on the kind of work that you're doing together.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, there was something I was going to ask that was just on the tip of my tongue before I decided to talk about something else. Here's what it was. When you are talking about the shared vision, it sounds like it's important for you, for everyone to have ownership and buy-in for this shared vision. Like they have come to this idea of what our long-term goal is together.
Mm-hmm.
So then, should they also have a voice, a seat at the table for mapping out and breaking down 30, 60, 90 days?
Yes, for sure. Number one, we do better work when we work with other people and we have additional thought partners around the table, because often, especially because of what we were just talking about, where we have a very narrow lens and we only know what we know, it's really easy to miss an important vocabulary or understanding or knowledge, right? Or an action that you're not thinking about, where it's like, wait, you have to do such and such first before we can implement this thing.
Yeah.
So that's a reason that it's really important. I will say too, what I have found in implementing this process with some teams is that you can have the same goal and then have different 30, 60, 90 day plans. Right.
Yeah.
Because, depending on what your work looks like, right? Like we as a school, for example, might all have the same school improvement goal, right? Where we're working on small group instruction or something. But depending on the grade level, that work is going to show up differently because of the skills that we're developing with students, right? Will automatically be different. So I think that's another reason it's important to come around the table, have a shared understanding of what is it that we're trying to do. Can we share what our knowledge and understanding is? How does that inform the actions that we are designing and tasking out? Like, what is it that I'm going to try and do this month that moves me closer to the goalpost that we've outlined, right? And making sure, even if people are developing their own plans, that we're checking in with each other about them and saying like, okay, what are you working on this month? Right? And how are we supporting each other? Like, are we working on the same thing? Can we be each other's kind of accountability partner? Right? Or is it a designated time that we're checking in on our plans to kind of say like, how do we do with those things that we thought we were going to do in 30 days? Right.
Yeah. Which is a perfect time for, like, PLC would be a perfect time to do those things because you're learning and growing together around that.
Yeah. I mean, and really it doesn't take a lot of time. It's like a 5-minute check-in, right? Of like, how are we doing? Like, is there anything that's lingering, right? That we didn't quite get completed in the 30 days? Why? Was it not small enough for you to tackle? Right. And maybe it was a better like 60-day thing that was going to have a smaller chunk started in 30. And then too, like, is there something that's now obsolete? Like we started off thinking that this was going to be an important task. We didn't get to it. And in fact, it's actually not something we need to be working on or doing.
Yeah.
Right. And like, and let it go, cross it off. It doesn't need to be carried over. Right. Like we had our best thinking at the beginning of the work. And this is where we are now.
Yeah. I love that. So kind of with that in mind, do you ever see or notice where people might need to adjust the end goal?
Yeah, I think that can happen, right? And the nice thing is like you kind of have a monthly checkpoint along the way with a smaller progress check-in at the end of the 90 days, right? Yes, we're checking in on our progress towards our goals each month, but we're asking ourselves at the end of 90 days or at the end of a quarter, how are we doing towards this longer term goal?
Yeah.
Is this longer term goal still relevant?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still feasible for us, knowing the progress that we've made? Like, especially if you've been pretty good about tackling the actions and items that you outlined for that first quarter, and you're still really far away from your progress, there might be some questions to make about like, how feasible is this? Like, we've been working really effectively and efficiently on the things that we outlined, and we're not getting there, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's perfectly okay to admit when you've learned more along the way.
Yeah.
And to adjust.
And more than perfect, actually. I mean, it's so great to be able to be, and that's kind of leads me to my next question. I think I'm totally off script, but it leads me
You
to my
said
next
it's not supposed to be scripted. It's okay.
Exactly. But there has to be vulnerability in this process.
For
so
sure.
What do you find? Number one, I guess this is a two-part question.
Okay.
What do you find are really important characteristics to hold as a facilitator of this kind of work? And what challenges get in the way?
Mm. Okay. So, in terms of creating an environment that allows for this, number one, any kind of relationship building among a team is going to be important. But I think it's also really important to stick to the facts in this conversation, because an action doesn't get completed does not mean anything about that person, right? It is an opportunity to reflect and to say, like, well, what was the challenge in completing this action, right? Was there a barrier that kept you from achieving what you set out to do? And how do we tackle that in this next 90 days? It's not a like shame on you for not getting it done, right? Because life happens and we all have the best laid plans. But I think too, we don't want it to get to the point where it's the end of the 90 days and it's the first opportunity that we've had to check in with our teammates, or if I'm facilitating with the team, to check in on progress on the goals. So along the way, I might be having some one-on-one check-ins with a teacher or somebody else on the team or a coach and asking them like, how's it going? Do you feel like you're still in line with what you planned? Is the plan still working for you? Like, it might not be a person issue. It might be a plan issue.
Right.
And life happens too. Like, maybe something unforeseen popped up that kept us from getting to the goals that we initially set out. So I think we have to make room for that and make room for the human beings that are trying to make human stuff happen with other humans. I mean, like, education is so human. And, our society expects all of us to be perfect because we are working with our most precious beings, right? And yet the only way to move forward is if we allow some mistakes to happen. So I think as the facilitator, it's really being careful that we don't allow judgment to cloud what's really happening. It's not a bad thing that something doesn't get done. It's an opportunity to explore, okay, was it important that got done, and why didn't it? And then what does that teach us moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important too, for if you are someone, but not necessarily even the facilitator, but someone as part of a team who has set goals has to have grit and stamina. And I think this goes back to making assumptions. Sometimes we can make assumptions that cause us to project on others. So if I'm making the assumption when I come to a team meeting and I know that we've set this goal, we've said we were going to visit each other about it and check in, then I can easily, when I go to that meeting, make the assumption, Probably no one else really wants to talk about this. Maybe they think it's a waste of time. Okay, well, if I'm feeling that way, other people are feeling that way. Let's just maybe check in for like 2 minutes and then move on. And then it becomes just this, kind of not meaningful thing anymore. Just because someone has lacked that grit or stamina. And so just one person is all it takes.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. And it's why I think too, one of the things you asked about was like, what's a barrier to doing this work, or a challenge for people who are trying to do it. I think it goes back to that too, where if we are not getting small and bite size with what we're asking of ourselves, it will be really difficult to complete something in 30 days, right? So that might also be the lesson in this is, my coach says this to me all the time. She's like, that's a project. That's not a task. I'm like, touche, right? Like, I know. I mean, like, this is why everybody needs a coach, right? Because I can 30, 60, 90 other day people all day, right? But like doing it to myself. So yeah, I mean, like, I think it's really asking yourself, like, is this actually a task that can be done and crossed off? Or is it naming 5 things and can I outline those 5 things that are a part of this, quote unquote project? And then prioritize like which things need to happen week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 in order for me to achieve that in 30 days. Because it might be that you're designing a 90-day, you're actually like designing something that will take 90 days to complete. So then it's asking myself, what progress am I making in 30 days?
Yeah.
Right? Like, where do I want to be? Kind of like your writing goals that we were, doing on X earlier. Like, am I getting to my goal of the number of words written this week? Right. And if not, like, okay, well, what happened this week? What kept me from that? Was it a me barrier? Was it a life barrier? Was it something else? Right. And so really getting clear on chunking things down can help us make progress.
Right. And if we are thinking about like teams and what people want to come to our environments and be a part of, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. At the same time, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves that they can actually work towards. Because if it's too big, and then it's going to seem like it's just impossible. And that's where we lose capacity. So I think what I'm taking away most from this, that I have to tell myself over and over again, I'm a big picture thinker and I love thinking about the future and I love thinking about goals and getting there, but I take it too far too fast. And I really need to pause and truly chew the cud. And I've got to break it down into very minute pieces, very small pieces.
Yep. Get small.
So if you are here tonight, we would love to know in the comments what you found most useful from this fantastic conversation. I feel like we could just keep talking, Linda. But Linda, tell our viewers, number one, what you would like for them to walk away from this conversation with.
I want you to know that if you have a goal that feels big, it is achievable, but it deserves your time and planning. So let the goal be there, but allow yourself time to really give how achieving that goal can be tangible for you. And when you think you've gone small enough, go smaller.
Yes. Yep. That's going to be my takeaway. When you think you've gone small enough, go smaller.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So good. Okay. Where can everyone find you?
Number one, I'm everywhere.
Yeah.
But Linda Rhyne Consulting is my business name to find me. But my maiden name is Schultz, SCHULTZ. So that's why I'm Linda Schultz on X, and Linda Schultz Rhyne on LinkedIn and all that. But Google search Linda Rhyne Consulting and my website should pop up and all those socials are there. Yeah. And I love talking to people. So like, please connect.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you guys, you will see all of the information that she just shared in the show notes. So where to find her will be in the show notes, and you can just click on her name and go straight to her platform. So be sure that if you are catching the replay of this on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Spotify or iTunes, check the show notes because you will see her there. Okay, Linda, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
It was super fun. Okay, guys, we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Happy Sunday.
Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with KC on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.